Morning, brother.
Hey, how are you?
Good. It's awful early where you're at.
I am drinking the bitterest coffee possible just to get me going, dude.
Are you a cream and sugar guy?
If I'm drinking coffee generally, well,
Mm,
almost always cream. Sugar is sort of negotiable.
yeah, gotta have cream.
Got to
Um,
have cream. Got to take away that bitterness out of my heart and my drink.
I got enough bitterness inside. I don't need
Yeah,
more.
exactly. I don't need it. I don't need to intake any more of it.
No. While we're waiting for folks to jump on, I want to tell everybody about the American Warrior Society. There's our beautiful challenge coin. And if you're considering joining something like our self preservation community, or any self preservation community for that matter, check us out. Take a 14-day free test drive on Mr. Mike's Weekend Drive. Find out if becoming a member is the right decision for you and your family. We've got everything from fitness, unarmed combatives. Let's see, we got Jean-Jacques Machado, one of his black belt, Christian Dare from Clinch MMA, teaching you everything from white belt to blue belt, BJJ. We've got Jason Kelly from American Top Team, teaching you some grappling. We've got anything and everything within the walls of the training vault, things like pistol caliber carbine. If you've been trying to figure out whether you want a red dot on your pistol, Mike C. Clender takes you through a whole series on that. We've got low light. I mean, everything. Too much to even name. Edge weapons, unarmed combatives, less lethal. Please check out that if that sounds like something that's going to keep you and your family safer. Tony is on. Says, good morning. John Shriver is on from Yukon, Oklahoma. He is coin number 1919. Guys, hit that share button. I am very excited to be joined by my good friend, Mr. Cecil Burch. I'll read Cecil's bio and we'll jump into it. Cecil has been training in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu since 1989 and is currently a third degree or a fourth degree now, Cecil.
Well, thanks to the IBGGF, I'm still a third degree.
Okay. Well, yeah. We can maybe go into that a little bit. Cecil Burch has been a martial artist and shooter for over 40 years. He has studied many different arts and has held numerous teaching credentials in several of them. Cecil has traveled extensively, conducting seminars across the U.S. as well as internationally. He has been a featured presenter at many tactical/defense-oriented conferences and has worked extensively with law enforcement officers, federal air marshals, military special operations troops, and private citizens. About a year and a half ago, if it's crazy, it seems that long, I took Cecil's basically like your core concepts class, or
My fundamental concepts class. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. I've raved about it multiple times. If you have an opportunity to train with Cecil, if he's coming to a town near you, I highly encourage you to jump in that, man. It is it's going to keep you safer, no question about it. How you been, brother?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm living the dream each and every day, my friend.
Me too. About a year and a half ago, I left the day job, turned over the white collar stress life to my brother, and opened my jiu-jitsu academy and became a full-time bum.
How's that going?
And so my life is about as good as it can get, dude. I am, I am. Everything's great. I'm on the mat either I'm on the mat 6 days a week or I'm traveling doing seminars. Either way, my life is. I can't complain.
Well, I'd love to hear that, man. Love to hear that. Now, you're located in the Phoenix area, correct?
Yeah, we're North Central Phoenix is where the academy is. You're going, leave the airport and head up towards like Grand Canyon or Ben Avery shooting range. We're right a few miles before you leave the city limits.
Is Scottsdale north of Phoenix?
Yes,
Okay.
Scottsdale is east and north. It's a band that runs on the east side of Phoenix, but it goes way north and kind of curves around.
Now, when I was there, we met you for dinner, Mike and
Yep.
I. Were we in Phoenix or Scottsdale?
Yeah, that was almost central. That was almost downtown Phoenix. That was
Okay.
where we ate was probably about 3 miles from downtown.
Yeah, that's a fantastic restaurant. Excellent
Yeah, that was great. I love
location.
that place. I love that place so much.
Yeah, well done. So you got your school up and running. Who's co-facilitating with you over there, Cecil?
My partner Sean Nuzzo, he's another third degree black belt from Megaton, and it's worked out great. Just because when I contemplated running an academy, I was like, well, I travel to do these seminars. What am I going to do for the academy? And he travels a lot too. He's his wife is from Peru, so he'll go down there, or he just likes to travel and enjoy life, which you should. So he just decided, hey, let's do the academy together, and we can cover each other. So like I'm gone. I was gone 2 weekends ago in Detroit. Sean covered, and he's going to be gone this upcoming week, and I got all the classes. So works really, really well. And the thing with jujitsu is no one person has the answer. I don't care who
Right.
you are. You could be red belt, and you don't have all the answers. But you start to look at multiple input from different people, and somebody goes, okay, what that guy's saying is good, but it doesn't I don't think I can implement it. Oh, but that thing that guy said, oh yeah, that's perfect for me. So it's a that co-teaming type stuff for teaching in this kind of stuff is usually, as long as you can get along personality wise, it's usually a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. Rasmic is on this morning. Gold members in the house. Ted Leonard says, wish everyone a blessed Good Friday.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's nice.
absolutely. Happy Good Friday, guys. Hope you have a wonderful Easter with you and with your family. Please like and hit that share button. One of the things I like about you, man, and I want to be clear with folks that are going to be listening in the podcast to come. You're not just a BJJ one trick pony, right? I mean, you're the things that I learned at your seminar was, there's some Greco-Roman wrestling influence in it
Yeah.
and multiple other things, I think.
Yep.
And you're pretty agnostic when it comes to, dogma. It's like, hey, man, whatever works, right?
So here's my standard. Does it work for most people in most situations against most attackers? And can we train it in a reasonable amount of training time? If you can check those boxes, I don't care where it comes from. I don't care what the system or whatever is. That's all I care about, because it's important. When we're talking about self-preservation, we need the truth. We don't need what we think. We don't need what we want to believe or what we like. It's what is the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
the truth is contextual for in this situation, and it's a very personal thing. So what I love might not work for you. So why am I going to be dogmatic about, oh, you got to do this move exactly the way Cecil does? No, no, you don't. But yeah, I try not to be, it's funny. I hated jujitsu. When I
Really?
started it, I hated it. I was a striker. By that point, by the time I was really looking seriously at jujitsu, I had 15 plus years in of martial arts, and it was striking. It was
Mm-hmm.
boxing. It was savat. It was Filipino martial arts. It was the Indonesian martial arts. It was like Jeet Kune Do. It was all those kind of things. It's like I did the jujitsu just to fill that grappling gap. Just like, if I find myself on the ground, how can I handle myself? But in my head, it was, as soon as I get to this little level, I'm done. I don't want to roll around with sweaty dudes dripping sweat in my mouth, and 300-pound guys crushing my head into the mat. I don't know. That's stupid. Who does that? Let me punch you in the face. Let me thigh kick you, right? Let me grab you in a plum and elbow you to death. That's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But yet I fell in love with jujitsu. I saw the efficacy of it. I saw why it works, and how it works for anybody. And so I gradually became a believer. So, you know what? I always find it funny when people go, oh, yeah, Cecil, the jujitsu guy. Okay, yeah, to some extent. But, but man, I've done a lot more, and I still continue to do a lot more than just the jujitsu.
Well, and we've talked about this before. For those of us that are getting a little long in the tooth, if you were doing martial arts in the 80s and early 90s, 99% of us were strikers back then. And then this little skinny Brazilian came along. You may have heard of him, named Hoist Gracie, and kind of opened everybody's eyes, at least
Yep,
mine. I mean, you were
yep,
in BJJ before that, which is amazing. I was not. I never heard of the damn thing.
sure, sure.
And I write about it in my amazing memoir on violence and varietals. But in all seriousness, At the time that the UFC came along, I was a year into being a bouncer, and already I was scratching my head, going, I can't really use all this striking I've spent all this
Yep.
time and effort developing. Because you start punching people at the club, you're going to get fired. The club's going to get sued, etc. So you just can't
Yep.
do it. It's not applicable. But there's a
Yep.
form of stand-up grappling and being able to control somebody where uh, BJJ is not perfect for that, but maybe some of the Greco-Roman and some of the other things that you are really skilled at are very applicable.
Well, and it's funny. A lot of people, when they hear grappling, they automatically think I'm going to grab you and pull you into my guard and drop to the ground, and
They
that's
see
the
that a lot,
right.
though, don't they?
They see it a lot, and they either we can argue why those people shouldn't be doing that. That's one part, or we can say there's a reason they're doing that and understand what that is. But that's just a slice of it. I mean, grappling goes from anywhere from that all the way on up to as soon as I make an attachment to you in any way, my hand grabs your bicep, my hand grabs your wrist. Okay, we are now in an entanglement. And then
Correct.
that entanglement might stop at that moment right away because you pull away and you break my grip and you get space. But we were in an entanglement and it can go from there on in. And the closer we are to a person standing or on the ground, the easier it is to control them. But here's the thing, you need that fighting anyway,
Yeah.
because what's the hard, you and I both know this as longtime strikers, what's the hardest part of hitting a guy? Keeping him from moving.
Right.
Yeah, I spent decades, literally decades, hours a day, multiple days a week, 4, 5, 6 days a week for decades, trying to hit, make sure I could hit a tiny little target that's moving.
Yeah.
Okay,
We are
cool.
independent actors in a three-dimensional space, and I've written
Yeah.
about that before. And that's, yeah.
And but if I can grab onto you, if I can get an underhook, man, that uppercut, that elbow that follows, it's a lot easier to land those shots. And it's a lot easier for me to keep you from landing shots on me. So this grappling thing, and what people have the wrong idea because they think of Hoist in UFC 1 against Shamrock, or
Mhm.
UFC whatever it was, 3 or 4 against Severn,
Severin. Yeah.
where they're two bigger wrestlers, and Hoist just goes, "Okay, I'll be on my back and wait for you to make a mistake." Which there's a strategy there and a tactic we could use it in certain contexts, but that's not the totality of grappling. But because most people, especially critics, don't actually step in the arena, right? And they don't actually feel it. They're like, oh, you did number one, you sport guys. Oh, yeah, sure. And then you guys just lay on your back in the ground. No, it's not. No, if my back's on the ground, I'm the most aggressive mofo you've ever seen in your entire life.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Dr. Fuller is checked on. Good morning, Dr. Fuller. So glad to have you on the show.
that's nice. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Cody, I may have talked about this before. Cody, my coach, Cody Hudson.
The wrist locker.
Yeah, the wrist locker. Of course, Cody is much more than that, but
I know, but
yeah. But he has a thing, they used to bring him in at the Knoxville Police Department and be like, "Hey, all right, guys, it's Friday morning, we're after combatives, if you guys can just get up and walk away, and from Cody, and you can have the rest of the day off." Of course, that's never ever happened
right,
because nobody can escape the side control.
right.
And it's I don't know if you've seen the Lex Friedman podcast recently with Dana White, but he talks about how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really a red pill moment.
Yep.
For a lot of people, you come in there and get on the mats, and you just get your ass handed to you by somebody who
Yep.
you would never imagine could just do that to another grown man.
Yep.
So if you haven't been red pilled, I highly encourage you to check out a studio and have that red pill moment. You need it. It's a humbling experience,
Yep.
and hopefully you'll keep coming back to learn. But I love your point of Cecil. I want to talk about that for a second because the entanglement, you're so right to say it can happen standing, it can happen on the ground, it can happen anywhere. It can happen between two parked cars, in a car. I mean, anywhere two human beings are in close proximity to one another. And another thing I would say, I wanted you to talk about that, but also, you mentioned about boxing, being able to hit a moving target in space with any relevant power. Somebody told me, and I don't know, you've done Western boxing for quite a while, and I have not, to be completely clear. I don't think I've ever taken a formal boxing class. I've been taught the basic 6-punch series and stuff like that as a close combat instructor in the Marine Corps, but nothing beyond that. But somebody said, the art of boxing is really the art of not getting hit, which I thought was pretty cool.
Well, and then there's a reason my nose looks the way it does because I didn't figure that out
It's a
in
handsome nose,
time.
by the way.
Well, fortunately, my wife thinks that about no other human being on the planet does. And when I was actually in Nashville, the class you were at, Sherman House was hosting and stuff, and he was helping me out. And at one point, I was doing side control on top of him, and he had looked up, and afterwards he said, because he's a surgeon. And he looks at me and goes, Cecil, you have the worst deviated septum I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm like, yeah, that's 45 years of getting kneed and headbutted and punched and elbowed in the head.
That's right.
And, bit by bit. And I wish I'd have figured out this whole idea that, no, dummy, you're supposed to not get hit. Don't wade in like Rocky Balboa and wade in and take 3 shots to give 2.
Right.
Right. But that was my mindset as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old. Actually, when I started, I guess it was 20. Yeah, I was 20 because I was still in. Yeah, I was only in college for a couple of years at the time, so I started about 20. And man, I was an idiot. I just would go in there, and 3 times a week, I'd hit top level boxing gym, and I'd start sparring these guys, including pros. And okay, yeah, I can take it, hammer me, I'm gonna keep coming. What an idiot. I
Yeah.
should have spent my time, when Pavo, the owner and head coach, was talking about, bob your head, Cecil, move, get out of the way, parry, shoulder catch, I should have gone, or shoulder roll, I should have gone, okay, Pavo, let me work on that. No, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. Cecil knows better. I'm just going to go straight forward and like a tank. Except my face is not built like a tank.
No, I'm too pretty for all that. But it's funny you say that. When I was competing in judo, you can almost always hear in the background my one of my training partners. He was a Greek guy, and he would be screaming, "Use more technique, Richie. Use more technique." Like I got all the technique I'm gonna get. Look who's on this morning with us, Cecil, our good friend John Hearn.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Good morning, Rich. Bad morning, Cecil. That's
That's okay. In 7 days, he's gonna have to say that to my face, and then somebody's getting choked out.
good luck with that, John. PJ Tahoe is on. It says, "Good morning, gentlemen. Coin number 2093 out here in California." PJ, I hope it's beautiful there this morning. Will Rhodes is on. Good morning from Missouri. Dr. Fuller says, "It's a striking nose. Don't get up. I'll show myself out." Bob is on. Says, "Good morning, gents. Thank you for everybody watching live. Please like and hit that share button, man." Let's talk about managing unknown contacts, and I'm sure at some point we'll trickle back into the entanglement. But
Sure.
I had something happen recently on another company that I manage. I got a call in a complaint, and the complaint was like, because this is going to hopefully just bear with me for a second, Cecil, but it's going to come to this unknown contact. And he says, "Man, one of your employees was out here in the branded vehicle, and he was a complete jerk to me. I asked him if he would pull forward so I could get to the diesel pumps, and he wouldn't do it, blah, blah, blah." So I bring the employee in, and I'm like, "What happened at the gas station the other morning?" And he's like, "Well, he just ran up on me. And I didn't know if I was being attacked or what." So, because a lot of attacks happen at gas stations. I'm like, "Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. A lot of attacks do." I said, "Was he a middle-aged white guy like me and you?" Like, "Yeah." "Was it early morning at the gas pump so the sun was out?" Like, "Yeah." "Was he in a branded tree service uniform with a tree service vehicle behind him?" Like, "Yeah." I'm like, Then is it not reasonable to assume that he really did not want to attack you? He just wants you to pull forward so he could get to the diesel pumps like he asked you to. And I paint that picture because it speaks to the amount of reasonableness that is necessary in order to be able to manage these. So
Yep.
please, Cecil, take it wherever you want, man.
Well, so managing unknown contacts is sort of the paradigm that Craig Douglas came up with. And it's not to say he's the first one to deal with this kind of situation, but what Craig did was kind of codify this in an reasonably easily processed way that you can internalize it and kind of apply it in a lot of situations. But the thing that people miss, especially because man, the whole concept of managing unknown contacts is incredibly dense and complex because life is dense and complex, and that's what gets lost a lot with this stuff. People look at it as like you hear this in the training community. Oh, somebody comes up to you, just yell, "No, I got nothing for you."
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's easy to say on a shooting range, in a
Mm-hmm.
lecture hall, or when I'm talking to like a YouTube camera, right? It's easy to say that stuff, but that's not real life. You go try that at the airport, right? Go fly somewhere, and somewhere between the beginning of the TSA line and boarding your plane, pull that stuff off when somebody gets a little close to you. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so, part of managing unknown contacts is what's the context, and there's all these little things that go into your calculator to help you decide that. Like exactly what you said. What's the time of day? Hmm, let's say, I don't know what time yours was, but let's say at 9 in the morning. Okay, do attacks happen at 9 in the morning? Sure, absolutely, happen anytime. But are they more likely to happen at 9? Well, no. Now that comes down a little bit. Are you in a big public space where there's already a lot of people doing the similar thing as you? Well, yeah. Okay, can attacks happen then? Sure, but it's a little bit less likely. It's a little bit more on down the scale. So you start plugging those things in and you go, okay, I got to watch myself with this guy, or, oh, this guy's a legitimate guy asking me to sign a petition. This is a guy legitimately asking if I can help jump his car. This is a guy legitimately asking, hey, can I move my car a little bit?
Yeah.
It's just all these pieces. It's not, um, there's almost this thought process with people is that we don't allow anybody close, that all these stupid cliches. That's not real life. You always let people close. You
Yeah.
have to, unless you're a hermit or something or similar, right? um, you have to at some point. So what managing under context, what Craig did was give you more of a template of, all right, should we have a much more heightened sense of awareness and concern now, or can we kind of vibrate along here a little bit more, and then where are we on that scale? And there's a lot to it. It drives me up the wall when somebody takes like a 2 hour managing under contacts block at a conference, and I've taught them. I've taught that. So it's not that I'm saying you can't do that, but somebody will take 1 2 hour session or something similar, or they'll do ECQC once, so they'll do my close contact handgun class once, and then they think that they understand the totality of muck, and more importantly, that they completely have it internalized. And
Yeah.
man, it's tough because situations are tough.
Yeah, I mean, Cecil, I even asked him, I said, okay, so he's a middle-aged white guy in a branded clothing. And so did he have an East Tennessee accent? I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay. And I said, and you're four dudes in the F-350, right? Four, big dudes working construction. I said, well, and this is one man. How do you reason your way to, he was running up on me.
Yeah.
And I even showed it. Show me how he came at you. Show me how the ran up on me. Like, well, I mean, he walked up, but I mean, it just seemed sudden. I'm like, well, then you need to be more self-aware. But the guy's not. It's not a threat, and that's part of the problem. There was a video Came out a couple of years ago. It wasn't a shooting, so the gun community didn't really pay it any mind, but I thought it was incredibly impactful. And it was the field training officer was with a rookie, and the rookie, pulls a tag up, and it comes back to this guy, and I guess it's flashing on his screen that he's got a concealed carry permit. So when the kid gets out of the car, he's got his hand on his gun and he's trembling, walking up to the car, and his FTO is like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, it says he's got a gun." I'm like, how did you know that? Well, it said on the screen. Like, right, exactly. Did he show it to you? Did he point it at you? Then what are you doing? This guy's been fingerprinted. He went through all the steps. It's like, relax. It's different when you see the gun moving around underneath their leg and they're being jumpy inside the car. I say all that because, again, I go back to there's a reasonableness that has to be attached to the person. And if you lack that ability to read given situations, I'll give you another one. I was in Albuquerque 2 weeks ago, and this car pulls in and this other car pulls in, and and I told my wife, as soon as they pulled up next to each other, I said, they're selling this car. These people are selling this car to each other because we're waiting on my son to come out of the store. She's like, how do you know that? I said, well, look, it's a father and a son, or what appears to be, and a father and a son. One guy's wearing scrubs and it's 5:30. So he probably just got off work, grabbed his kid. The other dad, when he got out of the car, he opens up all the doors for an inspection. And sure as shit, I watched the whole thing go down, write the check and what have you. But my point is I think if we want to be situationally aware instead of this bullshit about keeping your head on a swivel and counting everybody with a hat, looking for the bulge for some guy wearing 5'11" pants who's probably carrying the appendix, who gives a shit? Try to read these situations contextually. Yep. Is there any other way that you can think of, Cecil, to prepare for stuff like that?
A lot of thought and effort into practicing it. It's like anything. It's literally like anything we will ever do. Learn to drive a car, learn to play guitar, learn to use a computer, learn a foreign language, whatever. You just don't, here's the lesson. Great, got it, ready to go. You got to put time in. You got to practice. You got to do it over and over and over again until at some point you now own it.
Yep.
But to your point, that's the whole point of managing unknown contacts. It's not this weird John Belushi in Animal House jumping around, I'm ready for anybody type thing.
Nor is it a freaking checklist that's set in stone, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very malleable kind of thing, and we're taking in this information and then we're processing it. Just like you said, you looked at it right away. Well, who would have a car with all four doors open in that situation? Somebody they're ready for a bank robbery and the guys are going to jump in. Man, stop watching TV. That's not how that shit works. Sorry. I mean, it's just not.
Let's look at PJ's comment. Now, PJ, I won't say his real name, but retired FBI agent. We need to have you back on the show, brother. But he says you're always or should be evaluating the situation, the behavior, and the nonverbals, which with practice will enable you to make good, timely decisions. And the timely is very important, is it not?
Yep, that's it. Well, that's all it is, right? It's just like your employee that you were talking about. If he'd have just waited about 2 or 3 more seconds and processed the information, none of that ever would have happened, or it probably shouldn't have ever happened.
Right.
But it was that immediate caught by surprise. You didn't realize that there was somebody around you who was looking at you and was going to communicate something to you. And then so when they did, boom, now you're like, oh crap. And now you're backing up, trying to figure everything out. And it becomes more of a confrontation. And you see that in video after video of real world situations involving private citizens. Over and over again, you see that overreaction in situations that it shouldn't happen. And then somebody gets shot that shouldn't get shot. And then the person doing the shooting, who's a normal, good guy, is now in prison because they didn't process the information correctly. And they panicked because they didn't have the ability to process the information.
Yeah. Dr. Fuller says it's truly a thinking man's game. You have to keep your mind working. Training, practice, and experience frees up more of your mind to put conscious thought toward what you're presented with. Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, let's talk about Dr. Fuller's amazing book, No Safe Alternative:
Yeah.
Improving How We Teach Cops to Kill, um, or his book on his 20-year odyssey in the FBI called Painting Over Rust. Yeah, and he's absolutely right, man. The more that you can uh, move into the category of subconscious competence, I think is the buzzword these days.
Yeah.
But build that subconscious competence so that when there is something out that falls outside, that pattern, now we have more time to put bandwidth toward that, right?
Yep. That's the thing, oh, as much as it pains me, John Hearn, he goes so deep into this, and there's so much documentation um to it because he's a pointy-headed Poindexter. But the whole idea of overlearning, this idea of going deep into something, is to help you have that little cushion in your time, in your reaction time, because you learned it so well. You bring in this level of automaticity, again, a term I really learned from John. And then once you have that, then all you're doing is processing information. You don't have to think about, well, when this happens, I got to remember to do this. No, that's going to happen. It's like breathing, or just walking. If we're just walking on a flat, even so, we don't think put one foot here, then one foot here. We just walk. We don't think about breathing, even though it can be under conscious control. We don't think about it. It's just automatic. Well, the more we've ingrained all these actions, including the whole idea of managing unknown context, seeing what's coming in, processing information, then once we have all the information, we have to make a decision. That's much easier to do because we don't have to think about all this stuff. That's jujitsu. That's one of the areas that people have a hard time learning when they're new to jujitsu, is especially if they come from something else, like they come from the gun community, right? Where like let's face it, shooting adequately is not a hard physical action to learn. It doesn't take you a long time to get to a basic level of efficacy and functionality in shooting. And so you go from that, where let's say you take like a really good weekend class from Seaclander, and you practice, you dry fire a couple days a week, you go live fire once a month. Man, in 6 months, you're probably pretty solid. I bet somebody like that would by that point be the equivalent minimum of like a C class USPSA shooter, which is a decent level.
Oh yeah,
And probably better than what 90% of the gun carriers on the planet.
definitely police officers, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you go from that and then into jujitsu, and it's a whole nother world. The techniques are easy to learn, but then you go against this guy and it doesn't work. And then you go against this guy and it does work. And then you go back a couple weeks later and you go with the first guy and the move works. And you're like, what the hell? This doesn't make sense. Well, it does, because the technique does not operate in a vacuum. It operates with all this other input, physical and otherwise, coming at you from the other person that affects every single decision you make. Well, guess what? That's processing the sensory input in the real world, in a uncontrolled environment, like a gas. I pull up into the gas station. What do I have to look for? Everything. What am I looking for? I don't know. Because it's different. You go to the really nice QT in the good part of town that was just built. The situations you encounter there is probably different from that really old dirty gas and sip that's been there for 50 years in a really bad part of town. Same situation, you're pulling up for gas at a gas and sip, but what you encounter might be 180 degrees. Well, how do you prepare for that? By doing it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug is on. It says, "Good morning from Columbus, Ohio." Coin number 78. Doug is a lieutenant with a police agency up there. I'll leave it at that.
Nice. Nice.
So my son, who I've mentioned many times out here before, cybersecurity research scientist out there in New Mexico, and he says, I go into his house. I flew out there to visit him one time, and he does Gracie Baja out there.
Okay.
He's a blue belt, and he's got on his dry erase board, and he's doing like he's computer programming, and he's got a series, right? So, and I'm going to butcher it, so don't hold me to it, Cecil. But basically, like if I get in the garden, guy's got it, stupid enough to have his hands on the mat, I'm going for a Kimura. Okay, he's got his hands on my belly. I'm going to sweep the hands off and go for a Kimura. Right. If I get the Kimura, I'm going to switch it to an Umaplata to raise my sight line, and stuff like that. But I mean, if you're that kind of guy and that's the way your brain works, is there anything wrong with that, Cecil?
No, 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 no. Especially in the beginning. That's a really good way of processing information. My point earlier was, and I butchered doing it, but my point was to get from that minimal level of learning the technique to being able to execute it against another guy who's doing everything possible as fast as possible to fight you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a leap. Well, we got to what? How do you make the leap? By putting the time in. Da, 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 and you get to this point. There's no between a good high blue belt. Certainly, there's no difference between a purple belt and a black belt as far really as technique.
Hmm.
Most purple belt,
You mean there's no
belts.
secret black belt Cecil
There's
Burch
yeah.
technique?
I wish there was. I was really disappointed when Meg gave me my black belt, and I'm waiting for the secret book of techniques that
Yeah.
he uses to destroy me on a regular basis. And I kept waiting. And 15 years later, I'm still waiting for the damn thing. You know, it really, what a black belt has over a brown belt, a purple belt, a blue belt, even a white belt is not really technique.
Hmm.
It's timing, movement, understanding of pressure, understanding of posture, hand control, and all of that on a with automaticity, where you're not thinking about all these things. Your body's moving, and it was like, oh, this pressure change, boom, I get the sweep. Oh, the pressure's this way. Oh, kimura, right? It's
Right.
so, but you have to start somewhere. So what your son's doing with that, that's great. He's making a
A
kind
decision
of
tree, something
a
like that.
decision tree.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I used to do that. Once I got a little bit higher level and started to understand stuff, all my things that look like that, and I still do that, but it's a mind map of all these interchangeable things, right? It's not a linear process. It's boom, 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 boom. And they interact all like this in a moving bubble all the time. Um, and
Okay.
what, and,
Now I'm going to take you into the deep water
okay,
where you're going to do really well. I know because
okay,
I know your background.
okay.
Because you're talking about that spider web that goes out, right? Uh, Now we're going to add in a snubby 38 or J frame, or we're going to add in a screwdriver or some kind of weapon.
Yep.
Now, how does that calculus change for you, or how should it change for somebody else?
Well, it does and it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't change it, but it does. The weapon then becomes your primary focus. It's a little less positional control and a little bit more on dealing with that situation in the moment. So, like, what I teach is sort of this level approach of as soon as there's a shift in pressure where they're controlling you, try to get out of it. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
That's the first level. Second level is, oh, they're reaching for their waistband because that's where bad guys usually carry weapons somewhere. Oh, well, stop it. Why is he reaching for a waistband? Well, or a pocket or his back pocket, whatever it is. Well, there's only one reason because he's grabbing something out of there to use on you. So stop it. And then
Right.
the third level is, oh, now it's out. Well, how do we take care of it? Well, if it's a projectile weapon, you got to do this. If it's a contact weapon, you got to do that. And so those become primary. But right below it, I still need to think about position, posture, base, pressure, position. I still have to think about all that,
Yep.
but the weapon becomes primary. Now, here's the so in that sense, it changes a little bit. It changes the dynamic slightly, 3 degrees. But on the other hand, it really doesn't, because I should be doing that anyway. Let's say we're doing pure jujitsu. I got my
Hmm.
gi on, you have your gi on, we're just rolling. It's all pure submission. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, you're not going to hurt me. I'm not going to hurt you,
Hmm.
but I should be controlling your hands, or at the
Sure.
very least, monitoring your hands. Because how are you going to pass my guard? You need your
Right.
hands. How are you going to submit me? Unless you're Hicks and Gracie and you can slap on a triangle without hands, which
Right.
I experienced. My very first legitimate jujitsu roll was with Hickson, and in 30 seconds he put his hands in his belt,
Yeah.
stuck it there, and within 30 seconds had me tapping to a triangle.
That's sick.
But short of that level of godhood, right,
Yeah.
demigod level, you're going to have to use your hands to do the submission. You're going to have to use your hands in some way to set up a sweep. You're going to use your hands to stop me from submitting you. So I should be using my hand. Sorry, I should be monitoring or controlling your hands anyway in a pure jujitsu. The
Hmm.
problem is I can get away with not doing it, right? Because, all right, you passed my guard, no big deal, I'll get out of it. Or you stop that submission, cool, I'll go to something else. Whereas if I do that, I'm that lackadaisical with hand control in with weapons, I'm dead.
Okay. Let's talk about this. So we're talking about in-fight weapons access, right? I
Yeah,
think the term I stole from you.
that's Craig. That's Craig's term.
Okay. Well, then we stole it from Craig.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
But I guess the question I wanted to ask is, I think sometimes we go to the gun too fast. Sometimes we go to the gun, and I say gun, it could be any weapon, right? But you know, hands are used to access weapons. Whether I'm accessing yours, I'm stopping yours, I'm accessing mine. Um, when and how do I know when I can go for my weapon?
Oh, oh. Um, After a lot of time of doing it, you start to pick up certain cues where you know it's okay. And I know that's a horribly nebulous statement,
That's a
but that's
crappy
the
statement there,
I
Cecil.
know it sucks. I know
I
excuse
was
me,
hoping
as
you'd
an
say something like, "I've got an underhook here, and I've got a wrist control there." Something. Give me something, brother.
no, no, I mean that's one of them. But what if you don't have that?
Right.
Do you still access a weapon? I
I
don't know.
don't know.
It depends, right? There's so many levels and variables to this that it becomes super hard to have a definitive black and white or even fairly dark gray answer on some of this. It's I can give you guidelines. Craig can give you guidelines. Chris Fry, Paul Sharp, Larry Lindemann, those of us who teach similar stuff,
Mhm.
you and Mike, we can give somebody guidelines and training methodologies and drills to help bring that understanding out, but you still got to do it. I cannot download directly into your operating system the software needed to understand in-fight weapons access.
Oh, let me ask you this though. Let's go into some of the minute details. Are
All
you
right.
looking for the flaring of an elbow, the blading of? I mean, is there some kind of physical movement when you're moving with a guy that you're like, this son of a bitch is going for? He's making that move that I've seen a million times.
Well, certainly, if we're in an entanglement,
Hmm.
standing around the ground, if this guy removes one of his controlling limbs away from that entanglement, you immediately have to go, well, why? What is he doing?
Right.
You are losing half your tools in that situation to control this fight. So you think that what you're going to do with that other hand is going to have a better and direct impact on the fight than you using both hands, getting an underhook and a far wrist tie, double underhooks, whatever. You taking that hand away to do something else is more important. Well, that should tell me on the other end that you're doing something I probably should pay attention to.
Right. And that
So
comes from
yeah,
that.
if you pull the
Yeah.
hand away, I'm like, all right, I got to deal with that. Either I got to control that limb, I got to then get to your back, I got to get to a better position, I got to do something about that. That's one of the criteria. If your elbow, let's say you have both hands on me somehow, I
Mhm.
got both hands on you, whatever, and
Mhm.
your elbow flares out, well, I love that
Oh yeah.
because that, there's, I mean, jujitsu 101, like you've just given me tons of stuff. So yeah, I'm looking for multiple things, but it's also a feel. Like what's the
Right.
pressure? What's the position? What's the angle? And again, that's very hard to just define for somebody.
And again, that goes back to the doing things enough where you create that subconscious competence. I'm going to get to a couple of comments here, Cecil.
Yeah,
PJ, I'm sorry, says, and that in turn allows you to act quickly in response to the information you're receiving. Can only act appropriate as you can process the input. And of course, Dr. Fuller reminds us, is this where the phrase slow is smooth, smooth is fast kind of thing? Yeah, that's been butchered for the past 40 years. But I think he's right. The idea is, and Aaron Janetti, who's doing some amazing knife work. I've had him on the show before. I need to get him back on.
good guy.
Yeah, great guy. But he's talking about choreographing the move and working the flow until you get it. Now we can make it more ballistic, add in other things, but that's where the learning occurs.
Yep.
Doug says, I've been doing BJJ for over 2 years. I still really suck at it. It can be frustrating at times getting
Yep.
smashed and subbed every class. I want to see the people that sub in Doug. I don't know if you know Doug, but he competes in strongman competition, one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen.
Oh,
So
good Lord.
you send me somebody that's subbing you. I find that hard to believe. But
I'm going to
sometimes,
run from that guy.
yes, trust me, he's a beast. But sometimes it is a good roll or hitting a move that you've been working on for a while that keeps me coming back. That
Yep.
little dopamine hit, that's what keeps
Yep.
us all coming back.
Yep.
Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, but the entanglement with guns. I was on a podcast recently. This is what is the most misunderstood thing in the shooting community, and then the self. I said the shooting community is probably that gun grappling happens. I think there was a long time where it's bullshit. This just doesn't
That's right.
happen. It's
That's right. That's
and
right.
then we see the video evidence. It's like it happens almost every single time. It's just insane the frequency with which it happens, and yet so few people are training on that paradigm.
Yeah. Well, and here's the funny thing: when it doesn't happen, it almost always is in the range where it can happen. You know,
Correct. Yep.
because that's the thing. Well, you'll get those critics. Well, see, so then if it's so easy, if then why doesn't it happen every single time? Well, number one, most of the time the criminal attacker has no interest in gladiatorial combat. You start to fight back, you give him any resistance, he's like, hey, I'm out of here. I don't need this crap. I'm going to wait for the next guy who's going to be an easy mark. So they're not, as soon as you start to fight back, they're like, oh ho, you're challenging my Shaolin Temple Kung Fu. We will fight. They don't care,
Yeah.
right? So they're out of there. So that's one reason you don't see more of it. And then here's the overwhelming second reason why we don't see it more often. And this is so obvious to anybody who doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't happen more often because most people don't know how to do it.
Right.
If a bad guy comes up to you, and this is what they do, this is absolutely what most criminals do. Even if they have a gun, they come right up to you where they're either touching you, maybe they get their hand on your shoulder, putting a hand on your chest, maybe grabbing you and steering you, but they're in contact distance even with the gun.
Right.
So in that moment when you've been attacked, you weren't ready for it. We just talked about this with Muck or with managing unknown contacts, where you aren't paying attention, and all of a sudden this thing happens. In that moment, if you've never grappled, you've never done it, you're not suddenly going to go, "Oh, hey, I've just discovered this move that we call an underhook."
Not
That's
gonna happen.
not when it comes out.
Not gonna happen.
And here's the proof, right? This is not Cecil's theory on this. I got actual documented proof that what I say is the gospel. So it's very hard to come up with stuff like how many fights go to the ground, like in the real world, right? It's
Right.
very hard to document some of this stuff. So it becomes very difficult to say, well, X number of situations go to an entanglement because it's very hard to have that data, right? Well, We have one community that does have that data, the U.S. Army, right? So the modern U.S. Army Combatives program is jiu-jitsu based and has been so since the late 90s. And what they do is they track any use of combatives, the office that deals with it. And I know this. I'm friends with Matt Larson, who created the damn thing. So, and I could talk to him. I could give Matt a call right now and go, "Hey, Matt, am I spot on about this?" Because, and I know I am. But so the office tracks usage by soldiers of any kind of combatives, and they'll go interview the guy after the fact. If he's dead, they'll interview squad mates, whatever, and they try to get the information. So they've documented thousands and thousands and literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of actual uses. So a few years ago, Modern Army put out a little program, a little report, and basically given a summary of all the data that they've had, and I had some connections to get me like at least to tell me what the summary was.
Right.
And here's the thing: 70% of the time that there's physical contact with the U.S. Army soldier and an enemy, it goes to an entanglement.
Yep.
70% of the time. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting to me. Of the major communities, the military is the least likely to get into an entanglement. Why? Well, it's not their mission. What's their mission? A bunch of guys who operate together, go shoot and blow up stuff from distance. We're more likely for a private citizen, for the criminal to come up to us, a cop, whatever. Military is the least likely. And yet, when there is a physical attachment or in that range, 70% of the time it goes to an entanglement. Why? Why are they different? Well, it's because every single U.S. Army soldier has a base level of understanding of jujitsu. You at least have level one U.S. Army combatives. So that's to my point earlier that I said, where why don't we see it more often with private citizens? Well, it's because almost nobody knows how to do that. I mean, yeah, is jujitsu far more popular now than it ever was? Sure, absolutely. I mean, in my academy is, we have within like a 7 mile radius, we have like four other jujitsu or MMA or no-gi gyms in that 7 mile circuit. Um, so jujitsu is more popular, but we're still talking about maybe 1% of the United States population that have done jujitsu. I mean,
Ever.
how many family members and friends that outside of you know shooting in the American Warrior Society? How many people do you just know, family members stuff, who do jujitsu?
None.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I
none.
have I have a bunch of my nieces, or yeah, a couple of my nieces and a bunch of my nephews who've done it because I got them involved for a period of time. I've had other family members do it. My son's brother-in-law trains with me, so there's a few, but that's the anomaly,
Yeah.
right? That's the anomaly. So most people don't know how to grapple. They're not going to suddenly figure it out when a gun's
But
right
what if they
here.
see red, Cecil? Come on, man.
Yeah,
What if they
yeah,
see?
exactly. I forgot. You can see red, and eat your spinach like Popeye, and all of a sudden Hulk out and go, throw bad guys around. I forgot. We don't need jujitsu. We don't need managing unknown contacts. We don't need any of that stuff. We just have to see red. That's one of those things that just drives me crazy.
I know, man. I know. They don't know what they don't know.
Nope.
TC Fuller says, criminals don't want to fight; they just want to victimize.
That's right.
And yeah, and when we see them, get turned around quickly when the fight is on, and that's another thing. I see sometimes the defender or the attacker would be better off if they maintain an entanglement. Sometimes you'll see an
Oh,
entanglement, and then they'll spin off, and then that's when the weapon comes out, and it's a bad day for somebody. So
yeah.
there was recently a police officer was stabbed to death in like 20 seconds in Las Cruces. If you haven't
Oh,
seen
yeah.
it,
That was horrifying.
yeah, we talked to a friend of ours who's a police officer down there, and we Mike and I trained those guys a few years ago, did a week long class in Las Cruces. Some of the finest police officers in the country are down there in that little border town in New Mexico. But it was horrific,
It is
horrific.
awful. It's
And
awful.
for those that haven't seen it, and Cecil's obviously seen it. The guy walks up, the police officer walks up, and there's a gentleman sitting on the ground. And this gentleman is a drug addled criminal homeless person. I don't know. He hits all three domains, right?
Yep.
But in fairness to the officer, as he approaches, maybe he doesn't know that is this the complainant? Is this the one that's called in the 911 call saying there's somebody on my property, or is this the guy? He doesn't know. But he gets too damn close right out of the gate.
Yep.
And his movement toward this drug-addled criminal homicidal homeless person is too quick. And Mike and I talked about it at length on the phone. We're like, what would you do in that context? When the guy, because it's immediate, the knife comes out and he's running
Yep.
at the guy, and they're like, what, 3 meters away, if that's a
At most. At
at
most.
most, right? So this officer turns and goes toward headlong flight, running away from the guy. Now, maybe that was the right decision, maybe it wasn't, but in some regard, maybe it would have been better for him to close in or crash in. What do you think?
Man,
Hard to say, right?
I hate saying that kind of stuff because then it seems very dismissive of the person who died, and I don't want to be that way. And it's very easy to Monday morning quarterback way after the fact when we don't we're not in the middle of that adrenaline dump out of nowhere, and that chemical hormonal thing cocktail just hits us. Man, making decisions in that situation is tough, but I think it goes back to the point we talked about earlier. What are you comfortable? What have you built in through overtraining, through automaticity? What are you comfortable doing? Do you have that great draw where you could, you got a sub-second draw coming out of your duty rig? Okay, there's a possible answer. Oh, I'm, a jiu-jitsu purple belt. I do this all the time. I was a, a, a decent high school wrestler. Cool, guy comes at me, boom, I'm going to crash in and control that situation. But you have to have some of that somewhere in you to make that decision. And I will bet you that this police officer, he had some basic defensive tactics. Maybe maybe they forced a session on him with some kind of grappling at some level. But has that been ingrained to the point where you feel comfortable going close, hands on with somebody like that? It's hard to say. I mean, myself, yeah, I have no problem attaching to somebody, right? Um, Sometimes I probably let strangers get a little closer than I should. Like if we want to be honest, I probably let certain strangers in certain situations get a little bit closer than I should. But that's because I'm super comfortable at that range. It doesn't bother me if the fight starts there. I'm probably going to do okay in that situation,
Yeah.
you know. Um, Whereas somebody else who's never been there before, man, you better watch it. You better move away. And then this leads to another thing that I hate so much in the community is it's really easy to say, well, just move away, create space, make distance, break contact. Yeah, but how? It's so much easier for somebody to move forward than you moving in any other direction. Oh, get off the X. Yeah, but the other guy's moving forward straight at you and he's got initiative, right? All these kind of things. Um, Everybody in the gun community understands the Tula print, or they know the Tula principle. Oh, average guy can can cover 7 yards in a second and a half. Yeah, well, what does that mean? 7 yards? That's a long distance, right? If you're shooting a pistol qualification and you got to do, I don't know, a bill drill at 7 yards, the pucker factor goes up a little bit because you're like, oh man, this is gonna hard. Can we do this at 3 yards? Right? So 7 yards really is pretty far away. But an average guy can clear that distance in a second and a half. And then and honestly, what are most people's draw times from a duty rig or from concealment? How many people are cold on demand can do less than a second and a half draw? So man, that attack comes, somebody, you're 3 yards away and the guy just lunges at you. Holy moly, you better have a .5 draw.
Hey, good luck with that. Even still,
Yeah,
they're going to crash into you. You're going to be on the ground fighting for the gun. So, for those that
exactly.
haven't seen it, I'll show you just so you can see how fast this happens here, guys. So, bear with me just for a second here.
What's up? Is this your place? So you're the one who called? You're the one who called? Huh?
There he goes.
Hernandez is just a few feet away when Silva pulls out a kitchen knife. Officer Hernandez turns to get some distance, but trips. Silva pounces forward and stabs him multiple times. Seconds after the attack on Hernandez, Silva turns to confront a witness, Isaiah Astorga. That confrontation largely happened off camera, but Silva can be heard threatening Astorga, who then shoots and kills him.
I mean, you saw how fast that went down. I mean, you've got the rest of your life to figure it out. And for this officer, it was a matter of seconds because he went straight for the neck. And what's interesting, if you break that entire video down, you can find it on YouTube. From the time that the blade comes out to the time that the armed citizen starts firing shots is like 25 seconds. It's insanely fast. And yet the damage was already done. The officer was dead on arrival. So the blade work is incredibly important. As we saw yesterday, Cecil, there was some drug-addled guy killed 4 people, I think it was, and wounded another 7 or 8.
Yeah. Oh, but that shouldn't happen because we have a good gun control laws, and
Right.
and as soon as because if we get rid of guns, we'll never have any mass attacks.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a complete fallacy. PJ says, great point on basic level of knowledge. I think we see this most clearly demonstrated in edge weapon attacks that are unfortunately quite successful. 99.9999% plus of the population has no idea how to contend
nope.
with an edge weapon attack, and that they do not. And even those guys that are very high level at dealing with edge weapons, whether that's Aaron Janetti or our good friend Mike Chanich or whomever, it's almost a coin toss. I mean,
It's
because
tough.
it's so dynamic, man.
Well, and you can make sure I'm not lying about this because you've seen it. What do I talk about in my coursework? Because there's all these people out there. Don't go to the ground, right? And what do I say in my coursework? We're going to deal with the situation when you find yourself on the ground through no intent of your own. And what's one of the ways we kind of work on
Well, the
that might
first print,
happen?
I think you skipped over it. It's get up. And I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
asking you, it's like,
just
how do
get
you
up.
mean to get up? You mean do a Gracie get up, a tactical get up? And you're
Yeah,
like, bro, just get up any
just
way
get
you
up.
can.
Just get up. But I say in the coursework, you might be on the ground. You didn't want to be because you tripped.
Right.
We all trip, we all stumble, we all slip just going through life. Now, all of a sudden, just like that officer, you go from, hey, what's going on? Did you do the report? To within a second, half a second, to like, oh my God, this guy's coming at me with a knife. And what does he do? Turns to runs and trips,
Yeah.
finds himself on the ground, and that's where the fight ends. You know, it just, it drives me crazy when especially the gun community ignores any, and you said it yourself earlier, Rich, if it's not a gun video where the good guy is using a gun, they almost always ignore it.
Right.
And yet there are far more of those situations than with the gun. And so you still have to understand the reality of criminal assault, the reality of violence, the reality of how this stuff looks and works. And you have to figure this all out ahead of time and build at least a bit of a skill set, in a handful of different areas to handle this. It's not, I'm sure that officer was experienced. I bet he was in reasonable shape.
Very, yeah.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter. He didn't have that, it was an incorrect decision. And again, I'm not,
And maybe luck wasn't on his side. Had
and
he
luck,
had he been able to, had he not tripped, right, Cecil? Headlong flight
exactly.
might have been the right thing. Mike and I were like, I don't
Yep.
know for me if I would cage and hold the gun, you know what I'm saying? Take control of the weapon, cage up and try to, I don't know. I mean,
Yep. Yep.
without playing that scenario out in the parking lot, given the same set of circumstances, and it would be a coin toss whether I walked away or not, because
Yep.
a lot of times gun people think, well, I'm going to get to the gun. Getting to the gun too fast is just as dangerous as getting to the gun too late. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, if you don't control the position, the gun belongs to whoever does control the position. I don't care who brought it into the fight. It's who controls the position gets to own and use that gun. So
Boom.
you drag race to the gun, you're in an inferior position or you're in a neutral position and you're not doing anything to try to control the other guy and you're not paying attention. You're just going to drag race for the gun. Good luck.
Yeah.
Because 8 out of 10 times, now it does work. This is the thing. It may work.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's not going to work, right? 8 out of 10 times. And I'm very confident saying that because by this point, I've either been a student in, an instructor in, or AI'd tens of thousands of these kind of evolutions where it's let's figure this out and either watch people or been involved personally doing it as the bad guy or as the good guy, practicing this and then seeing, I don't know how many, I know it's the fad all of a sudden is people bragging about how many videos they've watched. I've watched 10,000 or watched this. Dude, I've been doing this since I started this journey in the late 70s. Any chance I could get to see this. I don't even know how many of these things I've seen at this point. And so we can kind of say, here's the things that we know happen. And so many things happen. And yeah, everything works at some point. I don't care what works. I care what works most of the time for most people, again, with a reasonable amount of training time.
Yeah, totally, man. To your point about a long time, the 4th Marine Division hired me to create this women's threat management clinic and then put it on, present it. And so I wrote it up, brought Mike in to help me. And when I went on TV to talk about, hey, we got this upcoming thing coming for women, this is the number on the screen that you can enroll. That was 1995. And when I walked into the WATE studio, they're like, oh, are you the self-defense guy? And right then I thought it was funny. Like, I'm the self-defense guy, you know what I mean? But that was 29 years ago, man.
Right.
So what's interesting is there are people right now that have a huge following that have been doing it for a year and a half, and they don't know what they don't know. And I'm not being dismissive of their skills or what have you, but I mean, this is something that, and like I told my wife, I said, okay, look, I'm not going to try to make you do what I do. Okay. Part of it's profession, part of it's hobby, part of it's the way my weird brain's wired. And you may be the same way, Cecil. We're just weird like that, But I said, but when I tell you to get down or move or do whatever I tell you, you got to do it because something is not right, and I don't know if we're calling it spidey senses, if we're calling it, our lifestyle. I don't know. What do you want to call it?
Yeah, I like spidey sense because I'm a nerd. So that works for me.
Yeah, Peter Parker, big fan.
Yeah,
let's get to Doug's comment here. It says, reference to the New Mexico officer. I wonder if the societal and professional emphasis on being a more friendly officer is what caused him to manage that contact wrong. The unfortunate reality is that many officers have in the back of their mind that they cannot be too aggressive, especially initially, or they may get into trouble. This infuriates me. Yes, most people who police deal with are not trying to hurt or kill us, but when it's unknown, we must proceed cautiously. Precisely what we've been talking about. When it's unknown, proceed forward with caution. Don't walk up on this guy if you don't know. Yeah, I'm the complainant brother. I called 911. There's this guy over here. I mean, now I can walk up on the guy.
Yep.
But before then, he jumped up and he's looking at you with his head like this. He's got his hands kind of weird. You've got red flags going off, man.
Yep. It's funny. I had known William April since probably about 2005, probably. Yeah, that's probably when we started interacting. And first we were just interacting online, then we were exchanging private messages and stuff, and then we started texting and calling each other. I didn't see him teach until 2010 at the Mid-Atlantic Training Conference, and I sat in on his lecture because I was really curious. I've talked to him, and I was fascinated by the things he said, but I wanted to see his lecture. And a good chunk of that first lecture I saw was a comparison of essentially two types of police officers. And this is kind of William's words. I'm sort of paraphrasing.
Yeah.
One is that kind of perceived as a little more strict, a little bit more tough guy cop versus Andy Griffith.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you look at when you look, and this is William's point, when you look at the number of incidences of officers killed, and you find out what kind of officer they were, the vast majority, by a huge amount, tended to be the Andy Griffiths, the nice guys, the guys who would talk, the guys who would give the other guy the benefit of the doubt. They were the first ones to be taken advantage of. Whereas that one cop who might be a little bit, if he pulls you over for speeding, you go, God damn, that guy was an asshole. That kind of cop. He generally tends to be more likely the cop to go home to his family at night.
Yeah, and I have some inside baseball on that particular officer that lost his life there in Las Cruces, and I will not repeat it, but it's interesting that you bring that up. Let's put it that way, because there are factors, and why is that important specifically in 2024 that Cecil and I are talking about it? Because departments are hurting, man. They're hurting. And if you have a guy who's reasonably qualified, we're going to try to jam that square peg in a round hole, man. And it's not the right move for the community. It's not the right move for that officer. It's not the right move for his family. There are some people that are bred for this kind of work, and there are some people that are not. And the sad thing about it is we've demonized police, to Doug's point, to the point where you got to be doing TikTok videos and dancing around and acting like an asshole, when in reality, that's not your freaking job, man. Your job is to enforce the law without passion or prejudice, period. And, when I'm walking up on somebody, people would say, that's T-1000, man, especially in the hood, like from the Terminator 2 movie, the way I carried myself and shit like that, because it's all business. I'm not, even if I have to grocery you to the ground, put you in handcuffs, it's not emotional. It's just business, brother. I'll see you tomorrow because I know you're going to make bail, and we'll do this shit again tomorrow. No problem. But the Andy Griffin thing may have had a place at one point. I find it hard to believe. I think it's more fiction than anything.
Yeah, well, at this point it should be, because I think where we are at a societal point is going back to like the late 60s, early 70s. And I was not a good time society-wise. And it was certainly not a good time if you were in law enforcement. And I think we're back to that point, but even more so at a heightened level. And so there is a time to be Andy Griffith, but man, you got to be sure of your environment. You got to be sure of the situation. You got to be absolutely sure before you can kind of let that filter off a little bit and not be officer hard case. Yeah. Because you know what? If I'm in that situation, I'm going home. Yes. I'm going home to my wife and kids. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do anything to hurt anybody that doesn't deserve to be hurt, but I'm going home. And if that means you perceive me as kind of an ass, oh well. What's the Beretta song? Don't do the crime if you can, don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time.
Yeah. Steven's got a specific question here. I respect the fact that the specificity, Steven, I really appreciate that. It says, could you ask Cecil if he recommends a 2-on-1 for knife defense? Also, where can we find his seminar calendar? Thanks.
Yeah.
Explain the 2-on-1, explain to what he's talking about, and then go take it from there.
So 2-on-1 is any time, and there's different hand positions, but anytime I have two of my hands controlling one arm, or two of my arms controlling one arm of the other person. And wrestling, it's, I can use it to control the guy, take his back, do something. It with knife defense, I've got to stop that knife from coming forward and sewing machining me. So it's very difficult to use one of my arms against one of the bad guy's arms. But if I can get two hands on, wrap it up, whatever, if I can get two arms on one, the knifing arm, I have a better chance of starting to, at the very least, at the beginning, prevent the knife from entering my body. And then we can negotiate other things and do other actions. But yeah, 2-on-1 is, especially as the initial movement, is pretty important. Both Aaron Janetti and my friend Jerry Wetzel, who's been doing anti-knife stuff since 25 years at this point, red zone threat management. They both use the 2-on-1 as a primary tool, especially at the start of the fight.
And let's talk about, thinking of Aaron Janetti, and if you're not following him on Instagram or wherever, you should be, because he gives away some nuggets every single day.
Yeah, it does.
But just so people understand, it's not just static 2-on-1. They're moving. And
Oh, you're moving. Yeah.
And another thing is there's this idea of the fifth limb, right? I don't know if that's a Janetti thing or whatever, but you need to be thinking of it. I told my son when he got into jiu-jitsu early on, every limb has a job.
Yep.
Every limb. There's no hand. Every hand's got a placement. Every foot's got a placement. We're using our hips to generate power, whatever. Well, the same thing here. You'll see Janetti or some of these other guys that are doing the 2-on-1. It'll be 2-on-1, and then the head is got a job to do, and the hips have a job to do. It's not just the hands, right?
Yeah, the hands are just the attachment point.
Right. Exactly.
That's all it is. It's just the attachment point, but it's everything supporting the attachment point that is what's important.
Bingo, brother. Yeah. Dr. Fuller says, got to cuff you up. Just me here making the donuts. Yeah. And John Hearn says FBI profile of officer most likely to be murdered is almost always officer friendly traits. And we're breeding more officer friendly traits, which again is just telling you we're going to create more problems. And PJ has given us to the Center for the Study of Law Enforcement Officers Killed and Assaulted. And this link here for you is leoka.org if you're listening to a podcast to come. Doug says, question for Cecil. I have heard it said that 2-on-1 puts the defender at a disadvantage because the attacker can just switch hands. I have never seen that happen in real life encounter. Has Cecil?
Yeah, I have. There's a video I saw. It's been a while, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I remember we shared it among our group because we were like, do you believe this? We've actually seen it. Now, I put that at the level of can happen, very unlikely to happen type thing. Because it requires a higher level of training or experience, either one. But also it requires a higher level of thought. And what's very typical is both bad guys and good guys fixate on the tool. I've got the knife out. I've got the gun out. I must use it. When maybe what the better answer is, control the situation, stop this hand here, frame right here, underhook here, drive this way, get behind the guy. Then use the tool. That might be much more efficient. But we're so locked in, hyper focused on, I have this thing in my hand that separates me from the lower life form, so I must use it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult for somebody who hasn't put time into training it in the heat of that moment, even as the attacker, because you have the adrenaline dump too, to go, oh, he's stopping this, haha, and now we're doing West Side Story.
Yeah.
So it can happen, but I don't believe that it's too likely. And here's the thing, and again, with the 2-on-1, because of the way you're using your body, you're not locked into this grip and now it goes over here. It's the way your body's moving. I can easily shift to the 2-on-1 on that side.
Right.
It's not like I'm going to be locked on looking down going, oh, hey, the knife isn't there. Oh, it's over here. No, you're right there. You see it. Switch hands. Cool. I'm going to 2-on-1 on this side. That's very, that happens. That's not a difficult situation to train for, as long as you got to put some, flight time in, but it's not difficult to train for.
Yeah. And I think until you know what the hands are doing, it's probably a good idea to control the wrists anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. When in doubt,
Yeah.
control, either physically or visually monitor the arms, because again, that's what's going to beat you in the fight, regardless of what the fight is. It's going to be, the arms are going to be intimately involved
Mhm.
in that for the most part. Okay, maybe the guy just all of a sudden rears back and headbutts you. Okay, maybe. But short of stuff like that, the arms are going to be the primary driver, because that's how we as humans function.
Yeah. I want to use my last probably 10 minutes with you, Cecil. Thank you again for coming on. This has probably
You
been
bet.
our fourth or fifth talk. I always enjoy our time
Oh,
together.
me too, dude. Me too.
You know, you live in Phoenix. I've been out there. We've done some training with the law enforcement out there. They're fantastic people. I mean, but as good as they are, you still live in a pretty dangerous city, man. Where do you think this country's heading? Not necessarily just Phoenix, but anywhere. Is America heading to a good place or not? Is there things we can do to prepare for it, whether it's going good or bad? Take it wherever you want.
Man, I am so torn on that. Because I mean, excuse me this morning. Um, I'm torn on it because I'm a history geek. So you look back on our history, and we've had a lot of similar moments to this, and one unfortunately did lead to civil war. So I mean, it's not all roses, but most of the other times somehow we managed to kind of come through it. And so the history nerd academic in me goes, yeah, this sucks. There's going to be the tribulations, but we're going to come through it. But man, the other half of me, the pracademic side of me, goes, yeah, but we've never had these extraneous issues, right? Just the internet, the social media, the ubiquitousness of media and information coming in. That's completely, we've never had that before. And that's where I think the problem really comes from, um, is all this extra stuff coming from people with extremist views on both sides of the political aisle. But you have all these things yelling at each other, and it becomes, Goebbels said, "Tell a lie enough times, and it becomes the truth." Well, he would have gone crazy with social media. Could you
Mm,
imagine a manipulator like that with
yeah,
access to what we have? Well, guess what? We have those guys. We just don't know them yet. They're
correct.
probably in China, they're probably in Russia, and maybe there's some of them in the US too,
Mhm.
that can manipulate that. So, man, that worries me to go this way. Here's my the one thing of optimism that I have is that I think that we're driven, the country, and I think it's always been this way, is driven by the 15% on either end, 15% on the far side, 15% on the other. And the 70% in the middle, the average American, um, I think we can be moved one way or the other depending on the era, depending on what's going on. We went from, if you're not white, you are not you're not part of the community, to, well, that's stupid,
Right.
right? We go from, oh man, homosexuals should be burned at the stake versus, yeah, whatever, right? And so you got that meeting, that slight adjustment. And
Mhm.
so what I hope what this little piece of optimism is that with social media, it does. Okay, we're more inundated with the crap for sure, but
Mhm.
it's also easier for us to communicate with people who are completely different from us. I think. I mean, if you go back, I mean, certainly if we go back to our grandfathers, our grandparents' generation, how many of them outside of war traveled around the world?
Oh no.
Almost none, right? But
To your point, man, I don't, because I can take you within a 5 mile radius. No shit. Here in East Tennessee, and all the way back to William Brown in 1815, where he's buried, all the way up to where my grandfather's buried, and it's like 5 miles, over 200 years. You
yep,
know what I mean? So
yep.
it's an outstanding point.
And but from I think, or especially from my parents, our parents' generation to us, and then on, I think we each of us in each generation tend to travel more,
Right.
tend to be more open to other ideas. I mean, you and I both, we talk about going to the UK, going to Europe, going to other parts. I love travel. I love going to all these other places. And you see, and you start to meet these people, and you start to talk to these people. You're like, it's a little less, they suck, they're our enemy, right? And so I hold out that kernel of optimism, that interconnectivity and being able to talk to other people can help put the finger in the dike of all the crap coming into us on social media, on the internet, on all these, platforms that do this. That's I don't know. I don't know. I go back and forth. Some days I wake up and I'm super optimistic. And then the other days I wake up and go, I better check the ammo storage. I better check how much food do we have stocked up. I swing back and forth because it's so it swings just by what the news is going on any given day.
Yeah. My good friend Stephen Washington is on. Says, "Good morning, gentlemen, from Michigan. He is coin number 2003. Good morning, brother. Hope you're doing
Nice.
well." Stephen says, "I got to get to a class with Cecil. So if somebody wanted to train with you, Cecil, where would they need to go?"
Well, right now you have to go to Facebook or Instagram because my website's down because my hosting company is not being particularly helpful. Plus, I haven't had a whole lot of time to sit on live chat with them for an hour to get it fixed. But so my website's down right now, but it should be up here in the next few days. But you can go there, iacombatives.com.
Mhm.
Short of that, go to my Facebook business page or my Instagram page, Immediate Action Combatives. You can see stuff. I usually post, seminar announcements and links. Or if not, you can reach me and message me through through those platforms without much of a hassle. And I'm trying to do more on Livefire. I'm trying to
Oh, good.
I'm trying to be more active. It's just I haven't been active a whole lot the last 5 months or so. My wife has a medical situation right now, and
Mm,
so a lot of my energy is run the academy and then take care of her and take care of home and stuff. So I
yeah.
haven't been as Mr. I'm not Aaron Janetti right now
Yeah.
putting up clips every single day where you go, good Lord, dude, do you do anything else but film yourself? He's a good guy. I like Aaron a
Yeah,
lot.
I do too. He's the real deal, man. Really
Yep.
like that guy.
The next generation, he's one of those guys where the next generation is in good hands of
100%.
trainers and people coming up, guys like him.
Yeah, I gotta get up there and train with him someday, man.
Yeah.
Doug says, awesome discussion and information. Thank you, gentlemen. Cecil, brother, it's been too long. I always enjoy talking with you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, dude, I love it. Talking, not just talking to like-minded people, but talking to like-minded people who have their own depth and breadth of experience. Because I don't want to be in an echo chamber, right?
Right.
I want a discussion, but it's hard. It's harder to have a discussion with somebody who has been doing this for a year. And I'm not dismissing it, and so
Right.
don't get me wrong, but and I love talking to those people. But it's cool to come on to this show and we can just ramble about all this stuff because you've done it yourself for decade after decade after decade.
Yeah. Well, it's so great. And I gotta Mike and I gotta get back. Got to get back out there and train with you, man. At least break bread with you at a minimum, Cecil.
I think I'm going to go to Tulsa in 25.
Okay, good. Good.
You know, I kind of run the circuit between Dallas, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa, and so it's been a couple years. So I was just in Oklahoma City like 6 weeks ago or so. So I think in 25, I think maybe I'll see about Tulsa.
Well,
Just
let
to
me know, man.
get my folks out that way.
I'll come out there, train with you again.
Good. I'll partner you with Seeklander, and then we can beat the crap out of him.
I love that idea. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Cecil. Thanks so much for coming on. Everybody out there, have a wonderful Easter. And remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.